Now then, welcome back. So Luke Edwards is with us, football reporter with the Daily Telegraph. You're there, Luke?
Good evening, yes, I'm here, yeah.
Happy new season to you.
Oh, no, does it feel very happy? I don't know if it's happy. Begrudging start to new season, that would be my description.
I was watching Match of the Day 2 last night, and as ever there was a feature on the fans' unhappiness at Newcastle. There was a man there who'd had his season ticket for 25 odd years, and he had decided this was the year he wanted to hand it in. And there was a protest. I think about 300 fans involved in a protest in the lashing rain. Is that right?
Yeah, it's about that. Yeah, I mean, there was about 6,000 fans, I think, stayed away, which is maybe between 5,000 and 6,000. I think we're probably thinking stayed away, which is probably 1/10 of who was turning up last season. So it's a sizable minority, but unfortunately it remains a minority. It's a very toxic situation at the minute. I think the people are struggling to distinguish between supporting, the new manager Steve Bruce and getting over the loss of Rafa Benitez's departure and everything that is supposed to symbolise in terms of the club's lack of ambition. And it's pretty it just wasn't anything enjoyable about Sunday, really. Newcastle played okay in the first half, were terrible in the second. The atmosphere was flat. The fans were arguing amongst themselves between those who want a sort of more militant direct action to try and force Mike Ashley to sell, and in the middle of it all is Steve Bruce, who's got his dream job, and unfortunately the way things are at the minute, you can see it quickly turning into a bit of a nightmare for him, because Newcastle, whenever they're successful, everybody's pulling in the same direction. To use a cliche, they are very much Newcastle United, and at the minute they're not united at all. It's divided. As I say, I keep saying the word toxic, poisonous. And if the fans are going to, are not going to be with the team if they can't get their backing behind the new manager, then they're going to struggle this season.
It is a bit miserable, isn't it, for Steve Bruce? Because the story was perfect in many ways under different circumstances. His boyhood club, born a few miles down the road, I think rejected as a player a couple of times there and then went off, and he's the boy done good back home.
Yeah. I
appreciate he's the ex-Sunderland manager, which maybe isn't the perfect part of the story, but beyond that, it's a pretty nice one. He must be looking around thinking, what have I bitten off here?
Yeah, it's one of those. I think if Steve Bruce had got the job when he was first offered it, actually, he was offered it a couple of times when Bobby Robson was manager, and they actually offered it to him before Graham Souness took it, and he turned it down because he didn't want to knife his friend Bobby Robson in the back. I think if he'd have got it then, if he'd have been given it after the good job he did at Wigan, if you remember, actually, when he got the Sunderland job, I think he secured two, or Kevin might have even been playing for him if Kevin's there at Wigan when they secured 2 top 10 finishes. And if he'd have been offered it then fair enough. But I think the perception of him is, as I'm sure we'll remember Martin O'Neill battling against these criticisms that he's a dinosaur, that he's out of touch. He's been in the Championship. Okay, he did an excellent job at Hull City, but that's sort of conveniently forgotten. He actually walked out on Hull after taking them back into the Premier League for a second time. And then he went to Villa. He didn't do enough at Villa. He ended up losing his job. And then he was at Sheffield Wednesday doing a good job, but he'd only been there sort of 5 months. So there's just this perception of him that he's another one, along with Alan Pardew, along with Steve McLaren, along with John Carver, of these British managers who, for some reason, Ashley is in favour of or seems to gravitate to, and he's lucky to get the job. Now, when you combine that with the fact that Newcastle have probably lost their most popular manager since Bobby Robson, which is in Rafa Benitez, their sort of long, drawn-out nature. I think Benitez was very cute. I think he would have stayed, but I think when this offer from China came in, I think that changed everything, really, in his mind, and the contract was run down. He was able to blame Mike Ashley, being pushing against an open door in that respect, and he's got out with his reputation completely intact. And poor Steve Bruce has walked into this as a sort of an unpopular choice to replace a popular manager, and yeah, it could very quickly turn sour. I think the thing is, I've been here before with Newcastle when we've been in these sort of ugly protest periods, and what he needs to do, and it's the same for any manager, if he wins some games, it will silence it all down again. But he's got a team that's he's only been in charge of the team for 3.5 weeks. They've signed 5 players. none of whom have played in apart from Andy Carroll, who's injured, but the other 4 haven't played in the Premier League before. They've only been in for sort of days, rather than weeks, and all just feels very, very disjointed, all a little bit rushed and all a bit panicky. And before they know it, if he isn't Rafa Benitez didn't win any of the first 10 games last season. If Bruce is in that position, then they'll be calling for him to go, and Newcastle might be searching for a new manager. So it's a pretty horrible situation to be in. This should have been his dream job, as you say, Joe. But that's why he couldn't turn it down, even though everybody advised him against taking it. I just think he couldn't turn it down. It was the last chance he was going to get his dream job, but it could just turn into a nightmare so quickly.
Yeah, already he has the demeanour of somebody who knows this isn't right. That was what was so striking yesterday, even in the post-match interviews when he has to talk about the situation. It's obvious.
Yeah, I'm a bit surprised, but he was pretty upbeat, I think, before the first game. I just wonder whether the lack of atmosphere, the lack of support, the lack of faith there seemed to be, even those who turned up at the game, and there were still 45,000 of them there, they sort of seemed to not really want to be there. It's like they were supporting the team through gritted teeth, and that isn't a hangover from Rafa Benitez going. The club danced to Rafa Benitez's tune. It was Rafa Benitez's Newcastle United. We were all, the same in the media. We were all desperate for him to stay. And it just feels like the club is in mourning still, really, for him going, and they're going to have to snap out of it pretty quickly if they want to have any chance of staying up this season, because if the team isn't supported as we all know it can be at home, then Newcastle are going to be in trouble. It wouldn't matter who the manager is. I think they've done pretty well in the transfer window, but it's going to be how quickly those players settle. And eventually, for me, the fans are going to have to distinguish between being opposed to Ashley and backing the manager. Now, there is a hardcore element who would never want Steve Bruce there as manager, but the majority, the sensible majority, want to get behind him. But as with all football teams, he's got to provide something to give that majority something to cling on to, some cause for optimism, some cause for hope. So he needs to win. He needs to win games of football, and they're away at Norwich at the weekend. And suddenly, already, we're talking second game of the season. We're talking about a game that really, really Steve Bruce needs to win to help put this period of mourning behind them for Benitez, to get people to start forgetting about Benitez, and to get people to start thinking that actually this is a club that is moving forward, isn't constantly looking back at what the former manager did and where he's gone.
And I saw, John George Shelby twacked one off the post at one stage at 0-0, and Alan Saint-Maximin came on. He looked decent, had a bit of life about him, the kind of player that you could imagine Newcastle fans quite liking. They spent the guts of 60 million on him and Joe Linton. Yeah. So I don't know, like you're saying it, particularly in the second half, wasn't a great performance. Were there a few bright sparks there which maybe point to something approaching hope? Because I have read that it's actually a better squad than the one that Rafa was working with for much of his time there.
Yeah, I think it is a marginally better squad. I think the problem you've got is that those players you've talked about, that they're feeling their way in the Premier League, and we all know from watching years and years of Premier League football that if you come from the French League, if you come from the German League, it can take, most experienced manager, most knowledgeable people will say it takes around 6 months for players to adapt, to fully settle, to fully feel comfortable in the new league. So Newcastle have got to muddle along, and I think Joel Linton could be a good player. He certainly looks like he's got the physical attributes. I saw him play for Hoffenheim twice against Manchester City last season in the Champions League, and I thought he was impressive then. He looks a good player, but £40 million, and you've got the number 9 shirt on your back, he needs a goal. Alan Saint-Maximin, he looks lively. I agree with you. He looks like the sort of player that the Newcastle fans could certainly warm to. And Miguel Almiron, who was signed in January, he's doing what he did at the end of last season, which is worrying defensively with pace. There are causes for optimism. I think the problem is that Sean Longstaff, who's the great breakthrough star of last season, he doesn't look like he's fully recovered from his knee injury. If Manchester United had spent 35 million on him, I think they would have been disappointed. He didn't look very good yesterday. So much then relies on Shelby to provide your creativity, and he picked up an injury in the first half, and it's sort of like they've run out of ideas. And I think what they've done, rightly or wrongly, is there's still money to spend, but because Bruce came in so late and they didn't have a full summer of recruitment, as it were, they just didn't have time to probably add the 1 or 2 extra players to really improve the squad and really improve the first choice 11. So I think they're going to probably end up muddling through until January. I think they'll be in and around the bottom 6. for most of that period, and then it's just what they do in January. But it's another. When you sort of think about that in August, you do. Your heart does sink, doesn't it? You know, I'm talking now. Or what are we on? We're August 12th, and I'm talking about the Newcastle being in the bottom six for the majority of the campaign, and that's what depresses supporters so much. They thought with Rafa there that there would be a hope that it wouldn't be another season like this. With Rafa going, unfortunately, and the timing of everything and how little room for manoeuvre there was in recruitment after he left, it's going to be another season of struggle, and that is a depressing thought. So I can understand why everybody feels miserable, but at some point, they're going to have to snap out of it and start getting behind the team, because without their supporters behind them and without a unity of approach, Newcastle are in real trouble, and they would have been if Rafa Benitez was manager, if Pochettino was manager. You know, they need the fans behind them, because the squad, you know, it is a bottom half of the table squad.
Yeah, it's very dysfunctional. Before you go then, how many times will I be reading the Ashley close to sale story this year, and will it be true at any point? I'm
making a pledge to myself and to you now, Joe, that I will not write another transfer takeover might happen story unless I absolutely have to. I'm so bored of it. I suspect it'll all start again in October, November. I think there are supposedly people still sniffing around, but look, I'm so bored of it. Yeah. He's supposedly been, I think this is the 5th time this summer that he's been on the verge of selling it, and so till actually I see contracts signed and new owners, you know, sitting posing for pictures at St James's Park with a scarf held above their head, I'm not believing it, and I would advise everyone in Ireland just ignore it, and then eventually it will happen, and we probably won't be able to report about it anyway. So just ignore it, and I don't think anyone's going to fall for the same tricks again, which is, you know, every time a transfer window comes up, takeover talks start, and nothing happens.
Famous last words, Luke.
I know, it'll probably happen tomorrow now, and I look really stupid.
Thanks so much, football reporter with the Daily Telegraph. Thanks, Luke Edwards.